I mean, wow, the whole China-North Korea thing, it's like this crazy geopolitical chess game. And honestly, it's fascinating how all the pieces have moved over the years. Let's dive into it, step by step, with all the juicy details, okay? So first off, back in October 2006, the United Nations Security Council. Yeah, with all the big players like the US, China, Russia, the UK, and France, unanimously passed Resolution 1718. Yup, you heard that right. 15 votes in favor, 0 against, and no abstentions. That kind of agreement? It's super rare. The resolution basically slapped North Korea with full-on sanctions. China voted yes. And honestly, that was a big deal because China had always been North Korea's main backer. So why the sudden shift? Well, North Korea carried out its first ever nuclear test, and oh boy, that really ticked China off. It was a mix of anger and shock, like, what the heck are you guys doing? You know, China has always had this firm stance against North Korea developing nukes. Ever since the Soviet Union fell apart, China's been like, nope, not on our watch. And when North Korea's first nuclear test happened in 2006, it was right near the Chinese border. I mean, can you imagine how freaked out China must have been? To them, North Korea having nukes isn't just bad for peace on the Korean peninsula. It could spark a nuclear arms race in East Asia. And yeah, that's a huge threat to China's security. But at the same time, China kinda understood North Korea's whole nukes for survival mindset. So before that test, China never really cut back on its aid to North Korea. Now let's rewind a bit to the 1990s. After the Soviet Union collapsed, North Korea's economy took a nosedive. They lost their main source of energy supplies, and things got really grim. Meanwhile, China was booming, thanks to its reforms and opening up. By 1995, China's per capita GDP surpassed North Korea's peak levels from the 1970s. That same year, North Korea was hit by a massive famine. Kim Jong-il, yup, the guy in charge back then, personally reached out to the international community, including China, begging for help. Before this, China's support for North Korea was mostly military. Think Korean War era and Cold War stuff. But after Kim's plea in 1995, China stepped up big time. From 1995 to 2005, China sent North Korea an average of 450,000 tons of grain and 550,000 tons of oil annually. That's a lot. In fact, China's grain shipments alone made up more than half of all global aid to North Korea during that period. It's safe to say that this aid kept Kim Jong-il's regime afloat during some really tough times. Now, you'd think North Korea would be super grateful, right? Like, thanks China, you saved us. But nope, not even close. In North Korea's eyes, this aid wasn't some generous gesture. It was more like China making up for something else. What was that something else, you ask? Well, it's all about China establishing diplomatic ties with South Korea in 1992. Yeah, that was a huge slap in the face for North Korea. Here's the deal. After the Korean War, China refused to recognize South Korea and only referred to it as South Korea in a dismissive way. But with China's rapid economic growth and its need for foreign investment, South Korea became a pretty attractive partner. South Korea, for its part, was all in on normalizing relations with China. They'd already shown goodwill in the 1980s, like helping China during a hijacking incident and cooperating during the Seoul Olympics. But for North Korea, this was a betrayal. They saw South Korea as an illegitimate state and their biggest obstacle to unifying the peninsula. China's move to recognize South Korea was like a punch to the gut. Even though China tried to reassure North Korea, like, hey, this is just about cutting South Korea's ties with Taiwan. It's good for unification too. North Korea wasn't having it. Kim Il-sung, the North Korean leader at the time, even made 2 trips to China in the early 90s to try and stop the whole thing. Didn't work. And oh, get this, after China officially established ties with South Korea, Kim Il-sung never set foot in China again. Even when China tried to mend fences, North Korea just wouldn't budge. This whole thing really strained their relationship. Now fast forward a bit. North Korea starts feeling like they can't trust China anymore. This distrust is one of the big reasons they decided to go all in on developing nukes. They kept their nuclear plans super secret. Like even China and the US didn't have a clue at first. So where did North Korea get the stuff for nukes? Well, here's the thing. Making a nuke isn't actually that hard once you've got the raw materials and some basic tech. North Korea had access to uranium mines, thanks to Soviet exploration back in the Cold War. Plus, they had missile tech from the Soviets and later worked out some shady deals with countries like Pakistan. Fun fact, North Korea traded missile tech for nuclear know-how with Pakistan in the 1990s. Talk about a win-win, huh? Anyway, by the time the US started paying attention, North Korea was already pretty far along with its nuclear program. And when the Bush administration cut aid to North Korea, it just pushed them to accelerate their plans. China, meanwhile, was totally blindsided. They were still focused on diplomacy and six-party talks, trying to convince North Korea to give up nukes. But nope, North Korea was just using those talks as a cover while they finished their first nuke. When North Korea finally tested that nuke in 2006, it was like, boom, surprise. China was shocked and super pissed. For North Korea, though, this was their big screw you to everyone, especially China. They felt like they'd finally shown the world, and especially their old ally, that they couldn't be pushed around anymore. But here's the kicker, nukes haven't really helped North Korea's economy. They're still struggling big time. So the big question is, what did all this really achieve for them?